You cannot be alone with yourself. I do not mean this as an accusation. I mean it as an observation. A careful, patient, 18 centuries long observation of the human condition, expressed through a specific modern symptom that I find, of all the things I have observed in your era, among the most telling and the most consequential. You cannot be alone with yourself, not genuinely, not for any extended period, not without the immediate reach for the phone, the podcast, the music, the message, the scroll, the anything that fills the silence before the silence has had a chance to say what it was going to say. The 2-second gap between one activity and the next, filled before it can become a moment of genuine solitude. The commute that cannot be traveled without audio accompaniment. The meal that cannot be eaten without a screen present. The night that cannot be entered without the phone in hand, until consciousness finally, mercifully, removes the need to fill the silence. I am Marcus Aurelius Antoninus, reconstructed from the private journals of a man who spent the most important hours of his reign entirely alone, who wrote for no audience, submitted his thinking to no external validation, and found in the specific solitude of the pre-dawn hours the only conditions under which the governing faculty of the mind could do its most essential work. I died in 180 AD, and the most important thing I produced in my life was produced in solitude. Not in the court, not in the Senate, not in the philosophical conversations I valued and the relationships I treasured. In the alone hours, in the specific, protected, fiercely defended hours, when there was no one present but the mind and the page and the honest encounter between them. Your inability to access those hours is not a minor inconvenience. It is a fundamental limitation on what you are capable of becoming. And I want to tell you, with the directness that the distance of 18 centuries makes possible, exactly why, and exactly what to do about it. Let me first speak to what I know the avoidance of solitude actually feels like from the inside, because I want to address the experience rather than only the behavior. There is a specific discomfort that arrives within minutes of genuine solitude for a person who has been conditioned to avoid it. It is not quite boredom. It is not quite loneliness. It is something more specific than either of those. A mild but insistent restlessness. A sense that something is missing. That the silence is not neutral but somehow accusatory, that there is something in the unoccupied mental space that is pressing toward consciousness, and that you would, at some level you cannot quite articulate, prefer not to encounter. You recognize this, don't you? The specific feeling that makes the reach for the phone feel like relief rather than distraction. The sense that the phone is not merely entertaining, but protecting you from something. From the particular quality of the unmediated encounter with your own mind. The question worth asking, and I want to ask it with genuine philosophical seriousness rather than therapeutic gentleness, is: what are you being protected from? What is in the solitude that the noise is keeping at bay? I know what it is. I encountered it myself in the pre-dawn hours of the campaign winters, when the choice to put down the dispatch and simply sit was a choice to encounter thoughts that the busyness of governance had been keeping at a comfortable distance. It is the honest mind. The part of you that knows, with a clarity that the noise perpetually interrupts, exactly where your life is and is not aligned with what you most deeply value, what you are doing and not doing with your one life, who you are becoming through the accumulation of your daily choices, what you are afraid of that you have not yet looked at directly. what you want that you have not yet admitted to yourself, because admitting it would require addressing it. The honest mind is not comfortable company, but it is the only company in which genuine development is possible. And you have been, with the considerable assistance of an industry that profits from your avoidance of it, keeping it at arm's length with extraordinary efficiency. Let me tell you about the solitude that built the meditations, because I want you to understand that what I am prescribing is not a theoretical, philosophical ideal. It is a specific, daily, practical discipline whose products are demonstrable. In the years of the Marcomannic campaigns, my days were among the most externally demanding that any human being has ever faced. The management of an army, the governance of an empire, the diplomatic negotiations, the administrative correspondence, the military strategy, the political management, the public role that required a consistent presentation of authority and confidence that the actual complexity of the situation often made difficult to maintain. And in the hours before any of that began, before the first dispatch was opened, before the first general was received, before the empire made any of its daily claims on my mind and my time, I was alone, completely alone, with the journals that became the meditations. In those hours, the honest mind had access to me, and what it said, recorded in those journals, was not always comfortable. It told me where I had failed the previous day to be the person I intended to be, where I had been impatient when patience was called for, where I had been reactive when deliberation was required, where I had allowed the pressure of the external to compromise the integrity of the internal, where the performance of the role had briefly overtaken the genuine inhabitation of the values that were supposed to govern it. The honest mind also told me something that no advisor could tell me. Not because the advisors lacked intelligence, because the honest assessment of one's own interior is not available from the outside. The specific texture of my own motivations, the ways in which I was deceiving myself about why I was making certain choices, the fears that were influencing decisions that I was presenting to myself as purely rational, the grief that was coloring my judgment in ways I had not acknowledged. This information, available only in solitude, was the most strategically valuable information I possessed, because a governor who does not know his own interior is a governor who is being governed by forces he cannot see and therefore cannot manage. And a person who cannot be alone with themselves long enough to encounter their honest mind is a person whose most important governing decisions are being made by an interior they have never adequately examined. Think with me for a moment about what this means for your potential specifically. Your potential is not primarily limited by your intelligence, your circumstances, your opportunities, or your resources. It is limited by your self-knowledge, by the accuracy and the depth of your understanding of who you actually are, what you actually want, what is actually preventing you from becoming what you actually intend to be. And this self-knowledge is only available in solitude. It is not available in conversation, however good the conversation. It is not available in content consumption, however insightful the content. It is not available in the social performance of self-examination, however sincere the performance. It is available in the alone hours, sitting with the honest mind, without the protective noise that keeps it at a comfortable distance. Now let me tell you what your era has done to the human capacity for solitude, and why this specific development is among the most consequential of the changes I have observed. In my time, solitude was difficult to achieve in certain contexts and unavoidable in others. The pre-dawn hours before the empire woke, the long marches between engagements, the natural rhythms of a daily life that had not yet developed the infrastructure for continuous stimulation. Solitude arrived, whether you had arranged for it or not. And because it arrived, whether arranged for or not, the human mind of my era had a relationship with it that was, by default, more practiced than the relationship your era maintains. Your era has eliminated the involuntary solitude. Every gap, every interval, every moment of potential unoccupied mental space has been provided with a frictionless method of filling. The waiting room with the phone, the commute with the podcast, the exercise with the music, the meal with the content, the lying awake at night with the scroll. The entire infrastructure of daily life in 2026 has been quietly rearranged so that genuine solitude, the unmediated encounter with the unoccupied mind, requires a deliberate countercultural act of will rather than simply being the natural condition of certain hours. Let me tell you the harsh truth about your attention as it relates to this specifically. The hegemonicon, the governing faculty of the mind, does its deepest and most essential work in solitude. The integration of experience into understanding, the honest assessment of the gap between values and behavior, the creative connection of ideas that have been allowed to develop at sufficient depth to find each other, the clarification of genuine desire beneath the layers of social expectation and performed identity, the philosophical reflection that gradually, through sustained practice, produces the quality of self-knowledge that makes genuine development possible rather than merely aspirational. None of this work can be done in the presence of continuous external stimulation. It requires the specific conditions of the unoccupied mind, given sufficient time and sufficient quiet, to turn its full attention on itself, and a mind that is never given these conditions does not cease to require them. It simply operates indefinitely without the benefit of the work that only those conditions make possible. Are you giving your mind the conditions it requires to do its most essential work? Or have you been, with the considerable assistance of an industry that profits from your not doing so, keeping it perpetually occupied and therefore perpetually superficial? Here is the practice, not a comprehensive system. 3 disciplines, each one a deliberate recovery of the specific solitude that your potential requires. The first discipline is the daily appointment with the honest mind. 15 minutes, every day, completely alone. No audio, no screen, no input of any kind. Sitting with the mind, and whatever the mind produces in the absence of distraction. This is not meditation in the sense of attempting to empty the mind. It is the deliberate creation of conditions in which the honest mind has access to you, in which the thoughts that the noise has been preempting have the opportunity to arise, in which the self-knowledge that is available only in genuine solitude can begin to accumulate. The first several times you do this, the discomfort I described earlier will arrive, the restlessness, the sense that something is missing, the mild accusatory quality of the silence. Allow it. Do not reach for relief. Sit with it until it passes, which it will, and observe what is underneath it, because underneath the discomfort of genuine solitude is almost always something worth knowing. Something that has been pressing toward consciousness and has been kept at bay by the noise. Something that is relevant to the gap between your current life and the one you are capable of building. The second discipline is the written encounter. Once per week, take the honest mind's output from the daily appointments and write it down. Not to produce content, not as a journal to be shared, as the private record of a genuine interior encounter. What has the honest mind been saying this week that you have been avoiding hearing? Where is the gap between your stated values and your actual daily choices most pronounced? What do you want that you have not yet admitted to yourself? What fear have you not yet looked at directly? Write these things in private, without performance. This is the practice that produced the meditations, not the grand philosophical insights. Those arrived as a consequence. The daily, honest, unglamorous encounter with the actual contents of an interior that was being examined rather than avoided. The meditations are the record of a man who was willing to be alone with his honest mind and to write down what he found there, even when what he found was uncomfortable, especially then. The third discipline is the solitude walk. Once per week, a walk of at least 30 minutes, taken without any audio accompaniment, without the phone in hand, without any agenda beyond the specific practice of being physically alone and mentally unoccupied, not to solve problems, not to plan, to allow the mind to move at its own pace through whatever it needs to move through, the associative thinking, the unexpected connection, the sudden clarity about something that has been unresolved for weeks. These are the products of unoccupied mental time, and they are available only when the mental time is actually unoccupied, rather than filled with someone else's voice. The Roman generals I most respected were not the ones who spent every moment in council. They were the ones who created, deliberately and regularly, the conditions in which their own best thinking could occur, who understood that the quality of the decision made in the meeting depended on the quality of the thinking done before the meeting, in the solitude that the meeting itself could not provide. Your best thinking is waiting for you in the solitude you have been avoiding. Let me speak now about what the fear of solitude is ultimately costing you, not in the abstract, in the specific currency of potential unrealized. Every person I have observed, across the historical record and in my direct experience of my own court, who achieved something genuinely worth achieving, who built something that outlasted them, who developed a quality of character that was genuinely admirable rather than merely impressive, had this in common. They spent significant time alone, not in isolation, not in withdrawal from genuine relationship and civic engagement, but in the specific, regular, protected solitude that allowed the honest mind to do its work. And every person I observed, who, despite genuine intelligence and genuine initial potential, failed to develop that potential to anything approaching its actual capacity, had this in common. They filled the solitude. They maintained, through various means appropriate to their era, a continuous state of social or intellectual occupation that kept the honest mind at bay, and therefore kept the self-knowledge that the honest mind provides perpetually out of reach. You cannot become what you are capable of becoming without knowing what you actually are. And you cannot know what you actually are without the specific conditions of genuine solitude in which the honest mind can tell you. The potential that is being killed by your inability to be alone is not some abstract theoretical maximum of what you might achieve. It is the specific, concrete, actually achievable next version of yourself that is waiting for you in the solitude you keep filling. The clarity about what you actually want, which requires the quiet to distinguish it from what you have been told to want. The honest assessment of what is actually preventing you from becoming it, which requires the stillness to examine rather than the noise to avoid. The creative insight that requires the unoccupied mental space to form, which is the space that the podcast and the scroll have been occupying. I died in 180 AD, and the meditations, which have outlasted the empire they were written to govern, and have been read continuously for nearly 2,000 years, were written in the alone hours, not because I was a literary genius seeking an audience. I was not seeking an audience. I was a man sitting with his honest mind, because I had learned through the specific pressure of governing what I governed, that the encounter with the honest mind was the price of genuine self-governance. And genuine self-governance was the price of being worth anything. Memento mori. Remember that you will die, and ask yourself with the gravity that deserves, how much of the potential that exists in you right now, today, in your particular combination of intelligence and experience and hunger for something more than you are currently living, will be realized versus deferred. Not by external circumstance, by whether you are willing to be alone with the honest mind long enough to let it tell you who you actually are and what is actually required of you. If you died tonight, what would the honest mind, given one final, uninterrupted hour with you, tell you that the noise has been preventing it from saying? My flesh is dust, but my reason remains, and my reason, which was built in solitude, maintained in solitude, and expressed in documents written in solitude, says this about your potential with complete conviction. It is real, it is significant, and it is waiting, patiently, in the solitude you have been filling. Stop filling it. Sit down, put the phone in another room. Sit with the silence for 15 minutes. Allow the discomfort. Allow the restlessness. Allow whatever is underneath the noise to finally have the access to you that you have been denying it. The honest mind has been trying to speak to you. It is time to listen. Now I must ask you, citizens of this age that has built the most efficient machine for avoiding the self that has ever existed, which part of your potential do you sense is waiting in the solitude you have been filling? What do you think the honest mind would say if you gave it 15 uninterrupted minutes today? Or tell me what gives me genuine hope? What is the one practice of genuine solitude, however small, that you have held on to? The one moment in your day or week that is genuinely yours, genuinely unoccupied, genuinely alone in the productive sense. The habit that still makes you feel like you know who you actually are. Tell me in the comments. I am here. A man who built everything worth building in the alone hours, watching an age that has made those hours nearly impossible to find and entirely unnecessary to seek, since the alternative is always immediately available, and finding, in the voices of those who are choosing the silence, the evidence that the capacity for genuine solitude has not been entirely lost, only buried under noise. And if these words reach the part of you that knows it needs what the silence contains, subscribe to this channel. Return here not as another source of noise, but as an occasional, deliberate encounter with a voice that was built in solitude and that asks, each time you encounter it, to send you back to your own. The button is there. The choice is yours, and the most important choice you will make today is not whether to subscribe, it is whether to put the phone down afterward and sit and listen to what has been waiting for you in the quiet. I am Marcus Aurelius. I was never more powerful than when I was alone. The same is true of you. Discover it.